Now, in the clash tonight, we're going to be debating this, calling for Emily to apologise or quit. Professor Tim Luckhurst, the principal of South College, Durham University, and a former BBC executive, he says Emily needs to recognise she cannot keep working for the BBC if she wants to express her own political opinions. But Paul Connew, the former editor of the Sunday Mirror and co-author of a book called The BBC at Nearly 100, Will It Survive?, is an admirer of Emily Maitlis and thinks her bosses have already overreacted. Now, Tim, I was surprised that you would take this position on this. I thought you would back Emily Maitlis here, but even you, a staunch defender of the BBC and its journalism, and you're usually on here defending the BBC, thinks Ms Maitlis has taken a step too far.
Yeah, well, I think that's absolutely right, Dan, because what Emily Maitlis actually said, and it's not in the clip that you played, was that Dominic Cummings broke the rules and the country can see that, and it's shocked that the government cannot. Now, I think that that's a ludicrous thing for a BBC presenter to say, because the country doesn't think with one view. The country is clearly divided upon the subject. And when Emily Maitlis said that the country can see that, she was assuming that everyone thinks the way she thinks. And that's a very dangerous assumption. It both implies a political position, which in that case is hostile to the Johnson government, and implies that everyone agrees with her. Now, that's just wrong. And if I'd been a BBC presenter and I'd made a mistake like that, I'd have simply said, I'm sorry, I don't think that. I understand that there is more than one view in the United Kingdom, and by expressing an opinion which appeared to suggest that there was unanimity of opposition to Boris Johnson's special advisor, I was wrong, because that's simply a statement of fact. So that was a silly thing to say, a mistake, and I think it was just arrogant of Emily Maitlis not to see that that was a mistake. Then she went on to retweet a message from Piers Morgan, in which Piers Morgan said that there was a 10-year prison sentence for failing to quarantine properly. What is the punishment for failing to properly protect the country from a pandemic? Emily retweeted that. She said it had no political implication, but it does have a political implication. It implies that you think that the government has failed to protect the country properly from a pandemic. Now, again, that may be a perfectly reasonable view, but it's not a unanimous view, and it's not one that a BBC presenter should support, endorse, or retweet. Those are my positions. I'm not anti-Emily Maitlis. I think she's a very talented woman, but I think that she's been rather arrogant about this. I think she's failed to apologise when she should have done, and her editors are right to ask her to make that apology.
Well, Tim Luckhurst, it is actually a delight to agree with you on this occasion, because I know we often clash about the BBC, but I endorse every word that you just said. So Paul Connew, why is Tim Luckhurst wrong? Surely if Emily Maitlis wants to express her opinion and make her disdain for Boris Johnson and the government clear, she can do that in the private sector. She can go and work for The Guardian or LBC and get paid handsomely to do so. She shouldn't be working at the BBC.
Dan, I think that was a statement reflecting, I think, the great majority of the public's reaction to Dominic Cummings' Barnard Castle trip, and also, I gather, it was also scripted. It had been discussed with, presumably with her editor and the production team. Funnily enough, from BBC journalistic contacts of mine, I've been getting messages of support from Emily Maitlis, both from those whose political leanings go to the right and those that go to the left. So I think there's a lot of support for her, for her at the moment, within among her colleagues, even if the BBC hierarchy is
Of course
unhappy.
there is, because they're liberals and they feel the same way that she does politically.
I said from right and left.
They wouldn't feel that way, would they, if it was a right-wing presenter at the BBC? And I know they don't really exist, but if they were, they wouldn't feel that way if it was a right-wing presenter expressing their views. They sympathise with Emily Maitlis because they feel the same as her. They share that worldview.
Well, I did say for people from the left and the right within the BBC. I think there's a fear at the moment, and I suspect this is why Emily Maitlis did that interview with Press Gazette, that the BBC is currently running a little scared, of the government. and it isn't being. It's been rather weak. For example, last week we had Dawn Butler's expulsion from the Commons. A very interesting and significant story. Did it get kept by the BBC's main news bulletins? No, it was on the news channel. It didn't make the 6 or 10 o'clock news. Similarly, the Speaker of the House of Commons slammed Boris Johnson for bypassing Parliament in favour of a press conference in announcing the delay to the original lockdown easing date. That didn't make either the 6 or 10 o'clock news either. It did actually, funnily enough, make Newsnight. So I think there's a feeling on the left that the government is probably a little cowed.
Okay. Well, look,
by the government.
I absolutely understand what you're saying, Paul. We're having a slight trouble with your line, but Tim Luckhurst, we obviously understood the basis of what Paul's saying. He seems to suggest, like Emily Maitlis did, that the government could be wielding some form of editorial control over the BBC, that BBC management have almost become too scared of missives from Number 10.
Well, I think that that's patently not the case on this occasion. As an editor at the BBC, and I was a senior BBC editor, I would certainly have asked my presenter to apologise and withdraw those comments because they were patently partisan comments. And if they were approved by the editor of Newsnight, and I have no evidence that that's the case, but if they were approved by the editor of Newsnight, then that would compound the error because the editor would then themselves have also been endorsing a politically partisan position. But let's take the truth as it is portrayed to us by the BBC. It's not the government that has asked Emily Maitlis to back down and apologise. It's her own editor, her own editorial board. They are the ones who say that her performance was not acceptable, that she should think about it, and that they will be in touch with her and they will be speaking to her about it. Now, that's the right way to go. I'm not suggesting that Emily Maitlis, who's a very talented journalist, should be dismissed. I do think that Emily Maitlis is behaving with a degree of arrogance which is a little bit unattractive in a BBC presenter. If her own management team think that she has done something which is unacceptable in a Newsnight presenter, she should have the humility to acknowledge that on this occasion she's revealed political colours, that compromises her and her programme, and that she should back down and move on. That's what I want to see happen. I want to see Emily Maitlis continuing to present Newsnight. Let me be clear about that. I think she's a very good journalist, but I don't think that she should get away with expressing views which imply that she's hostile to the government, because it compromises her, it compromises her programme, and it compromises the BBC. That's not good for the corporation, which I admire. You're quite right, Dan.
Paul,
I don't think reporting the Cummings incident, amounts to a political statement, a political bias. She didn't
report it, though. She didn't report it. She gave her view of the situation, which wasn't proven at that time.
We're not discussing whether or not Newsnight should report a story. We're discussing how they reported the story. And that's a perfectly legitimate discussion. Of course, Newsnight should have reported the story. It was a profoundly controversial decision. I don't believe Dominic Cummings entirely either, but I'm entitled to express that view because I'm not presenting a programme for the BBC. The point is that Emily Maitlis expressed the view that the country was hostile to Dominic Cummings' decision, and that's just not true. The country takes a variety of views. There are people in this country who support Dominic Cummings very actively. Whether they are a majority or a minority, well, I suspect you're right. I suspect they're a minority, but that doesn't mean that the country was united. And the implication of Emily Maitlis' statement was that the country was united on the subject. That's just simply false. And as a journalist, you shouldn't say things on air which are not true.
Paul Connew, final word to you.
They weren't untrue. They were a reflection, I think, of how the country, was beginning to react. But I think we're making a mountain out of I think that fits into my concerns about pressure being brought by the government on the BBC, who are somewhat
Okay.
proud.
Well,
For example,
I hear what you're saying, Paul Connew, but we are struggling with your line, so thank you so much for joining us. That was Paul Connew, former editor of the Sunday Mirror, and also former BBC executive Tim Luckhurst from the University of Durham. Fascinating clash tonight. Welcome to the GB News YouTube channel. You can watch us live 24 hours a day, catch up on your favourite shows, and join in the conversation in the comments below.
Don't forget to subscribe and you'll never miss any of our exclusive content.